the change Y to I rule is this. This is one of 3 great spelling rules that we use whenever we have a base word and we want to attach a suffix to that base word. The first one was the doubling rule, different video. Next one was the drop the E rule, different video. And today we're going to talk about the change Y to I, which is exactly what it sounds like. When you have a word that ends in a Y, you change the Y to an I and you add the suffix. Now, in babies, you wouldn't just add an S to say more than one, because that would say bis, and that would sound funny, babis. So you have to, that's the only different thing here, you have to add ES when you're changing Y to I. Same with story, let's try it again. Change Y to an I, and then add ES to get stories. How about try? Change Y to an I, and add the suffix tried. The nice part about this rule is that it doesn't matter whether it's a vowel suffix or not, which, yay, you don't have to think about that. So if it starts with a consonant, that's okay. You still change Y to an I and add your suffix li, luckily. And if you have nis here, change Y to an I, and whoop, and you get happiness. So the only time you don't use this rule is when Y is part of a team, and when Y, you don't want to break up that nice strong team, and when the word, the suffix starts with an I, because we're never going to have 2 I's in English. That just doesn't happen. It's going to look so silly. So they pretty much catch on to when we don't. So what do we need to know before we teach this rule? Well, you need to know the 2 ways that we use Y at the end of a word. So first we teach that the Y, when you hear I at the end of a single syllable word, fry, sky, try, spy, then you use a Y to spell that sound, not an I. And the same with the E. If you hear E at the end of a word, any multi-syllable word, happy, lucky, silly, community, you're never going to spell it with an E. You're always going to spell it with a Y. So that's helpful to know. It's helpful to know what base words are and that you can attach suffixes to base words. It's helpful to know the 3 sounds of ED, and that's about it. Now, how do we teach this? I like to play games. You always want to gamify it if you can. So I have cards laid out there and numbered, and they just flip one over, and underneath one of these cards is a boom. And if they flip over the card and it says boom, they're out. But that's okay because we have other games that they can play. So, but anyway, so they flipped over the number 7 here. So they said 7, flipped it over, it was cry. And I said, okay, change cry to cries. And they have to write cry, remember to change the Y to an I, and then add ES, not just S. And then the next person's turn. They flip over 1, 2, 3, 4. And the word is try. Say, okay, so change try to tries. And then somebody else comes along and writes tries. Similarly, maybe you flip the card and it's got the suffix already there. So again, they're just writing lots of words, but just because they can write lots and lots of Y to I rule words does not mean that they can do this when they're writing sentences. So you have to give them lots of practice writing sentences that contain Y to I rule words, and so that they can solidify that pattern. And even then, once they can do it in individual words and they can do it with sentences, still doesn't mean they can do it in text when they're reading. So you have to give them lots of practice reading words with Y to I words in them. And I might say, where's the Y to I rule word here? Can you find it? And then they might find stories, and then you can read your text. So how do we level up or level down our learning? Well, the first thing you want to do is maybe you start teaching this rule right after teaching the Y as long I, so that you teach it. That's the first exposure that they get to it. And then maybe you just teach it when you're teaching one suffix, ES, and leave it at that. Then you teach it again when you introduce the ED. Probably you've already introduced ED by the time you get to this spelling pattern, but so you might just start there, and then as you move along and they learn the Y as spelled, the E sound at the end of words spelled with a Y, and multi-syllable words, then you might teach the Y to I again, and then every time you teach a new suffix, you teach Y to I again. It's just something that accumulates, and you build and you build and you build. And you know, eventually they'll figure out that AY, EY, and OY are teams that you don't break up. and that double I just looks funny. So that is the Y to I rule. Ta-da!